What's up, guys? It's Tony here. Welcome back to Man Cave Studios. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am going to be talking about the Great Lakes road trip, which were a series of vlogs and stops at different ballparks that I made and filmed for this channel over the course of about 5 days a couple of weeks ago. So I'll talk mostly about the ballparks. I'll also talk a little bit about the cities, some of the other stuff that I did while I was at these different cities. But first, what was my inspiration? Well, my inspiration was this book, which I saw in a Barnes & Noble about 2 years ago for the first time, called Baseball Road Trips by Timothy Malcolm. I started to kind of skim through it and looked at all the different ideas, and the one that kind of stuck out to me was what he called the Great Lakes road trip, minus Pittsburgh, because I had already been there about 11 years ago now. So let's start with Cleveland, which I think, after being there for the first time, gets a bad rap, because I know there are a lot of stereotypes about the city. Maybe it was just the areas I was in, but it was fine. I mean, it was probably cleaner than Philadelphia, which is where I'm near. Probably cleaner than a lot of the cities that I've been to. And I walked kind of a loop around downtown. It was pretty nice. There were some cool sculptures and different stuff, as you kind of saw in the vlog. And, you know, I obviously went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was a nice area, and it was nice in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You know, especially, obviously I'm a Rush fan, which is why I filmed a lot of Rush stuff while I was there. And then I went to the baseball game that night. Now, Progressive Field is right in the heart of downtown, which I like and dislike. I got out pretty quickly after the fireworks show ended. It was also a very beautiful ballpark, and you could see the city, like, you're in the city. It's not just a skyline in the distance, like, you're right there. And then especially with the fireworks at night, that made it even more beautiful. The stadium itself was pretty cool. The people that worked there were super nice. Now, the ballpark itself was kind of average. I mean, it's what you would expect from a ballpark. There was a cool thing which I wanted to do, which I didn't wind up doing because I don't even know why. They basically have an area in front of the bullpen where you can go down and get like a wristband and sit down there for an inning, which is a really good seat in the outfield. And then basically they kick you out after an inning. But it's a really cool seat, and you're like right in front of the bullpen. I wound up moving to down the right field line, which was a decent seat. I mean, it was a little bit blocked by, you know, the railings. I feel bad for the fans, though, because the team is... Anyways, the next day I set off for Detroit. I got one night in my hotel room, which was an apartment, which was lovely. But before even checking in or anything, I just, you know, parked my car, walked over to the stadium. Again, everything was downtown there, just like in Cleveland, and just like in Toronto too, so it's like very easily walkable. The thing about the Tiger Stadium is I was under the impression that the sun was going to set behind the first baseline, so I was going to be in the sun for maybe like 2 innings, and then the sun would set behind the building, but it didn't, because it was straight up and down behind me, and the sun never got behind you know, the levels that were up, like the 200, 300 levels. So I got sunburnt, and you can maybe even still see it. I got sunburnt. One thing is, there was a sort of a, you know, stadium staff member who kind of saw, I was looking at a map to see if I could, you know, find the place. It was like, I read online that there was a grab and go station, which there wasn't, and I was looking at the map for something like that. And he came over and, you know, asked if I needed help with anything, and thankfully he had sunscreen on him, so he supplied some of that sunscreen. I just applied it poorly. So if you're going to a Detroit Tigers game that starts at 1:10, I would recommend sitting as far up in the 100 level as possible. It's a great view, and you'll be in the shade the whole time. Now, the next day I toured the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. That was cool, but maybe just to me because I'm sort of a nerd. After that, I went through Ontario, which is massive, by the way. So I went through a little tiny sliver of Ontario, which took about 3.5 hours. And wound up in, well, near Toronto. I wound up staying in Oakville because the public transit in Toronto is much better than a lot of places here in the United States. Now, Toronto is obviously one of those places that's huge. You can do so much. You might even, you know, take a vacation 3-4 days there and not even touch the surface of what it has to offer. I just kind of did the basics. I did the CN Tower and the Hockey Hall of Fame. And then I went to the legislative building where Rush shot the moving pictures cover. I also took a tour of that building, which was pretty cool. Basically, for Americans, you know how we have a governor and a capital in every state, like New Jersey, where I live, is Trenton. Toronto is the capital of Ontario, the provincial capital, and Ottawa is the national capital, the capital of the whole country. The people that I was on the tour with didn't really understand that much. That was basically like their state house, their state assembly. But it's not a state, it's a province, because it's Canada, dummy. Anyways, I went to the Blue Jays game that night. That was a decent experience. I mean, I like the dugout deals, which there are 2 stands, one in around section 536, and I think another 230 something, 240 something. I don't know, I wasn't that low. But basically it's smaller portion sizes, but you pay less. So I got a hot dog and pretzel bites for I think $6. The one thing that I really disliked were the metal bars in front of the seats. Made it almost impossible to see, and the fan in front of me kept on leaning on his, which if you're ever at a baseball game or any sporting event for that matter, you don't need to lean forward. People will just like lean forward in their seat. It just doesn't make, you don't need to lean forward. Like, you can just sit back and just watch the game. And it's not that deep, like, especially in baseball. It's one game out of 162. Maybe I understand it in a postseason game when the stakes are higher and it's more intense. It's a regular season baseball game. You can sit like this and watch the game. You don't have to be up like this because you're just obstructing the people behind you. And so I always make an effort, no matter what sporting event I'm at, that I'm sitting like this. If I'm leaning forward like this. Not too much, but enough so that they can still see over me. In Toronto, the seats were also a little bit higher up, at least in the 500 level from each row. So without those metal bars, it would have been easier to see the field, but it was every single row, and I just don't understand them. So for a good part of the game, I was obstructed from even seeing like a sliver of the batter. No matter which way I turn, I could look around left, I could look around right, couldn't see anything. Now, it was cool being in an indoor stadium. I'd never seen a baseball game in an indoor stadium before. I've seen games in Arizona and Milwaukee, and I've been in Marlins Park, but not for a game. But in Arizona and Milwaukee, the roofs were open during the game, so I'd never actually like seen a game with the roof closed. That was the first one, and I've never been to the Trop yet, but that is something that I want to do next year when and if they have a roof on that stadium. But aside from all that, CN Tower was cool, a little bit pricey, but I would still recommend. Hockey Hall of Fame was awesome. The Legislative Assembly building was also pretty cool. I also stopped in Niagara Falls on the way back. That was a trip that I think was worth it. I wasn't originally going to go up in the tower, but I kind of decided, you know what, I'm probably never going to come back here, so might as well. It really is something that you have to see in person to understand like how majestic it really is. And after that, I headed home. One thing that I did really notice about all 3 ballparks I was at, which is kind of the basis for what I'm wearing right now, they gave away so much. There was so much promotional stuff at like every game that I was at, except Detroit, but I still got a bobblehead out of that. Toronto gave away a whole freaking jersey. Cleveland gave away these shirts. The Cleveland Buckeyes, which were a Negro League team, they were kind of celebrating that night. And it was also Dollar Dog Night, so it was like 3 different promotions, 4 different promotions at once in Cleveland. Detroit, it was, you know, the bobblehead. Toronto was the jersey, but I have gone to maybe 30 to 40 Phillies games in my life. I have never gotten anything more than an Aaron Nola bobblehead at 40 Phillies games. And I know they do some promotional stuff, but like compared with what Cleveland does fireworks every Friday, I think it is. Toronto gave away, like, this is probably 70, 80 bucks in value. Probably like $30 each, I would think, like $20, $30 each to produce. and they gave it away to 15,000 fans. And even though I only got the bobblehead in Detroit, that's 1-for-1. I've gotten one bobblehead at a Phillies game in 40 different times that I've been there. Like, I don't understand. Even when they were bad, they just didn't do any promotional stuff. I really don't get it. Makes me want to be a Rays fan even more, but that's not really possible. I'm kind of maxed out on that. Now, the other thing is, in Toronto, I took public transit. That was good. That actually was the most ideal scenario. In terms of all three of these stadiums, they're all downtown, so you either drive and then just get stuck in traffic later and just kind of accept that, or you can take public transit to all of them. Detroit had good public transit too. They had this thing called the People Mover, which I took to get from where I was in downtown to my hotel when I was just kind of touring the city afterwards. Cleveland has something similar, but I mean, you could drive to any of the cities. Toronto's probably the trickiest to get out of. Detroit, you probably could. There are a lot of garages there. You might have to walk a little bit to find one, or to, you know, get back to your car from being at a Tigers game. But there are a fair amount of garages there. There's a good amount of parking that you could get. And then, you know, Cleveland was probably the easiest. Like, I also kind of ran out of the stadium, so I got in my car and then just drove home, and that was, or drove to the hotel, and that was probably like 5 minutes from the time I got out of the garage to the time I got on the highway. But yeah, I like the road trip, obviously. I've done 2 of them this summer. I like the control that you have, having a car, being able to kind of decide for yourself when and where you want to go. Especially with the trip to nowhere that I did earlier this year, back in May. That was cool because it was like, I didn't have a set schedule. I didn't have a design for anything. I just kind of did what I felt like doing. This was a little more structured, as I kind of said it would be in the story time video I did on that road trip to nowhere. I mean, sure, you can travel by Amtrak, but they don't run that often, and you're kind of stuck once you're on board. You can fly by plane, but air travel is horrendous anymore. So I would highly recommend, if you're gonna do anything in terms of traveling, just go on a road trip. Like, you can stop just about anywhere. Especially, like, I traveled along a lot of different highways in these past couple road trips. A lot of them have rest stops. All of them have easy access to exits, so you can get off anywhere, eat anywhere. You know, stretch your legs, walk in a park, whatever you want to do. So I love the road trip, and I'm definitely going to do one next summer too. But anyways, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I got some more vlogs coming up, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, peace out, broskies.